Hi everybody, my name is Max. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about the wage gap in this video. So first of all, what is the wage gap? According to the most recent statistics that I was able to find, it looks like the median earnings for women in the United States at least, are at about 78 to 80% of the median earnings for men. So that's what's known as the wage gap. And the question is that we need to answer, right, is why do we see this gap in earnings? What accounts for the difference in earnings between men and women? So there are obviously a lot of different interpretations of the data. There are a lot of different viewpoints that are thrown around. One of them that I think we need to kind of get rid of or get out of the way first, right, is this idea that is the archaic idea that men and women do work at a different level of quality, right? That the reason women earn less on average is because they do lower quality work. And this, according to, if you look at the data, and even if you just think about it logically, this is almost certainly not the case. Because if you compare people who are doing, if you compare men and women in similar positions, right, who are similarly situated within a firm or a company or the workplace in general, if a man and a woman are doing similar jobs, we actually see that the wage gap decreases significantly when we're comparing those two people. That, in fact, when we're comparing similar positions, men and women, or women make almost as much as men do. For example, if you just take a random example, bank tellers, right? Male and female bank tellers, they don't earn. There isn't a very significant difference in their pay. If we assume that wages are an adequate, and this is a big if, right? But if we assume that wages are an adequate reflection of the value of somebody's labor, then these statistics tell us that, in fact, men and women's labor are the same value, right? Because they're being paid the same when we're comparing similar work, and that's important. And so I just wanted to get that out of the way. The fact still remains, though, that overall the wage gap exists. There's a 20 to 22% gap between earnings of men and women. So it seems as though when we review the data, it seems as though one of the major contributors to this is the fact that women are segregated into lower-paying jobs, and men are segregated into higher-paying jobs. Now, some people, especially a lot of people that you'll see on YouTube, they'll say that this is because women choose lower-paying jobs, and then men choose more difficult jobs, which, as a result, are higher-paying. Now, of course, the whole assumption right there is that personal choice is in fact completely free, and that it exists. People make these choices independent of any other kinds of conditions or influences, right? As if there aren't any institutions or relationships or societal norms, right, that influence the decisions that people make, that influence the decisions that women make, right? And this is obviously not the case. There are obviously endless different things, right, that impact the way women go about labor. You can't point out to me one moment in history where there was not a significant portion of women doing men's work, right? Throughout history, throughout American history, throughout European history, Asian history, throughout the history of humanity, right? Women have always done the same job that men have. Look at southern yeoman farmers, right, in the United States, like right before the Civil War, before the American Civil War. These southern kind of working class farmers could not have even survived, could not have made a living for themselves if they weren't employing their wives, their daughters, their aunts, their nieces in the fields, plowing and tilling the soil, and this and that. Okay, so this is just one of an endless amount of examples of women doing the kind of hard work that men do. People who say that women don't choose to do the same kind of work that men choose obviously haven't spent any time in, I don't know, North Philly, right, where I live. They don't see these single mothers, right? Single mothers of 2, 3, 4 kids working the night shift every night in some factory or wherever they work, trying to get their kids through school and put food on the table, right? I mean, this is absurd, right? To say that women choose lower-paying jobs when in fact you can all the time, no matter where, even outside the city, no matter where you go, you see women who are working just as hard, who are, doing just as dangerous jobs, who are working just as many hours, right, as men are. Okay. I mean, somebody like Dr. Warren Farrell, right? He'll say, he provided in his book Why Men Earn More, and what women can do about the wage gap or whatever it's called. In his book, he provided 25 different dimensions of difficulties, is what I call them, that he says account for the differences in pay, the overall wage gap, right? And some of them, one of them is psychological checkout is what he calls it. Jobs from which you cannot psychologically check out at the end of the day tend to pay more, and men tend to take those jobs. Okay. You want to talk about psychological checkout? What about being, 8 months pregnant? Last time I checked, you can't psychologically check out of that, right? Why do we ignore motherhood? The single most difficult job in the world, right? Across history. I can say that, I don't need to qualify that. I mean, we all know that it doesn't get any more difficult than motherhood, right? Why do we act like women aren't capable of the same level of effort and of difficulty, right, than men are? Well, another one of the dimensions that Dr. Farrell provides is if your position in your company, if you're responsible for the bottom, what he calls the bottom line, if the decisions that you make within your firm are directly affect the profit that you make. And that's a high stakes position, and those tend to pay more, and men tend to take those jobs. I don't know, but last time I checked, the decisions that a pregnant mother makes really affect the bottom line, right? They affect the life of her child, right? I could provide an endless amount of examples, right, where women are doing just the same thing, even more difficult things than any men could ever dream of doing, right? So this idea, to get back to the point, right, this idea that that women are, that the reason women are earning less on average is because they're making these kinds of decisions, right? And they just don't want to work as hard. It is so utterly false and anti-factual. I mean, I have to make up a word to describe it. I've never heard anybody use anti-factual. I mean, this is just how ludicrous, right, laughably absurd some of these positions are. That claim that, women don't want to work as hard as men. Yeah. So this is another big point that a lot of men's rights activists tend to make. That if in fact women and men do the same work, do the same quality work at different pay, right? If women do the same work for less pay, then why aren't firms hiring more women? Okay. And this is a good question. Well, the fact is, that is exactly what they're doing. That is precisely what they're doing. All right? Across the developing world, like I just said, you've got sweatshops, all female laborers, right? In American history, right, you've got female labor was extremely valuable for a lot of during around the Depression, during industrialization. Entire factories, which were only women and children working in, okay? The entire domestic service industry is built on the backs of female labor. To say that firms aren't hiring women is to completely ignore what is right in front of us. This is exactly what's happening. Firms are hiring more women. Women are increasingly are turning out in increasing numbers into the labor force.